The federal government is significantly loosening its proposed clean electricity regulations, backing away from the former goal of a net zero electricity grid by 2035 and replacing that goal with 2050. Federal Environment Minister Steven Guilbeault said the initial target might have been unrealistic.
Yeah, maybe some of the things we'd put on the table were too stringent and from a technical point of view would be difficult to achieve without Canadians incurring very high cost. And that's not something that I want.
Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario have long pushed back on the 2035 target, arguing that it could lead to potential power shortages and escalating costs. Despite this year change to 2050, Alberta is promising to take the feds to court. Rebecca Schulz is the Alberta Minister of Environment and Protected Areas, and she joins me now. Minister, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You've argued for 2050 in the past, and you're welcoming the change, but still talking about going to court. Why, when you got what you wanted here?
Yeah, first of all, I would say this is a win. This is what not only Alberta, but industry and other provinces like Ontario and Saskatchewan have been saying all along, that this is absolutely unachievable and unrealistic and very costly for taxpayers across the country. So from that perspective, this is a win when we see the federal environment minister finally admitting that he was wrong and saying that, what these provinces were saying was correct the entire time. However, even though this changes the headline, the details within those regulations are still problematic. The performance standards, again, the technology does not exist to get us there. The end-of-life prescriptions are problematic. I think that could result in stranded assets. The cost is huge, $40 billion. About a quarter of that would be felt in Alberta alone. And for all of these reasons, in addition to the fact that it is also unconstitutional, this is an area of provincial jurisdiction, we will be taking the federal government to court. And I believe, based on recent decisions around Impact Assessment Act, Bill C-69, as well as plastics, I'm pretty confident in our chances.
Okay, the jurisdictional argument I'll leave to the courts to decide, but in terms of the inability because of technical limitations and other things, I get that if the argument was 10 years from now, but it's now 25 years from now. The way technology in the clean sector is just moving at that pace, it's like the iPhone. It's just going fast. So it doesn't a quarter of a century give you the runway you need.
Yeah, industry is still saying that this is very much not feasible. And especially when you take these regulations, layer on an emissions cap, layer on a carbon tax, it makes Canada completely uncompetitive. And it is chasing away a lot of the investments in technology and innovation that will help us reduce further emissions. And so that's really where I think industry, it's not just governments. You do have provinces and independent regulators across the country saying this will create problems with our grids. So people will not be able to rely on power when they flip on a light switch in their homes. It will cost them a significant amount more, either on their taxes or their electricity bills. But again, there are major concerns here when it comes to technology and innovation. And, we've seen in the last 24 hours since these regulations were made public, a number of industry organizations, from Electricity Canada to the Business Council of Alberta, the Chamber of Commerce here in Calgary. We're hearing more and more both companies and industry organizations coming out and saying,
right,
the fine print on this, still not feasible.
Okay, so it's the fine print, because I remember even under the old regulations, under the old target date of 2035, I spoke with your premier on the show about this, and she said, we're on board, we want a net zero grid, we can't do it by 2035. If Steven Guilbeault would just move the date to 2050, we could get there. But now you're saying you can't get there even though he's moved the date to 2050.
Well, at the same time, at the beginning, we also asked for flexibility, of course, given our unique needs, obviously our energy mix here in Alberta. And so, you have Minister Guilbeault saying, oh, we've added flexibility, and we have industry saying where. The emissions limit of 65 tons per gigawatt hour virtually precludes any and all investment in CCUS. The pooling concept is a challenge for Alberta's electricity sector. And then again, you have this layering of policies that brings a chill on investment in the technology that's actually going to be needed to get us to those performance standards.
But is the issue now the technical limitations and the cost, or is it the structure of your energy market? Because it's a very different electricity market in Alberta than in other places, which are much more vigorously regulated. You're more of an open market concept there. I mean, is that the challenge because of the uncertainty in the market-driven system you have, that the certainty just isn't there to make the investments they need?
It's why we may see a greater threat of these regulations, or a greater impact of these regulations on Alberta. However, we're still seeing and hearing these concerns from Saskatchewan, Ontario, and other parts of the country. So we're not unique there. This is, again, independent analysis and the feedback that industry has provided. I know just last week I spoke to the Calgary Chamber of Commerce, and industry was saying how quite frankly, deflating it has been to spend so much time with the federal government, walking them through modeling and scenarios, and have the federal government completely ignore all of the feedback that they provided. I know certainly after the last election, Premier Smith stepped in and said, we're going to reset the relationship with Ottawa. We're going to work on areas where we can find some common ground. But we've seen this federal government time and time again just make ideological targets and ignore all of the feasibility, the technical analysis, and the modeling, both from provinces, industry, and independent third parties, which is a problem here.
Okay, I want to talk about the relationship with the new U.S. government, because Premier Smith has weighed in on that. I don't know if she's going to get a reset or not, but she's certainly trying to respond to what President-elect Donald Trump's his attacks on Canada online, complaining that the U.S. is subsidizing Canada, seemingly referring to the trade imbalance between the two countries. Danielle Smith responded to Trump's social media post today, explaining why Canada sends more to the U.S. than Canada buys from the U.S., pointing to things like oil and gas, saying literally millions of good-paying American jobs and companies rely on these affordable raw materials from Canada to make trillions of dollars of wealth in your country. Why is Danielle Smith making that argument? Do you think this is the argument that can resonate with the president-elect? Because she seems to have some relationships with people in Trump's orbit, and certainly Alberta oil is a key part of their domestic consumption.
You know, I think it's great to see premiers across the country standing up for Canada when it comes to these negotiations with the United States. And I know certainly our premier has put a lot of effort into building relationships south of the border. I know she's been spending a lot of time down there and will be in the coming months. I think the key piece here is our trade relationship is an important one, both from a jobs and economy perspective, but of course, also when it comes to energy security. And so I think it's fantastic to see our premier standing up, talking about the importance of that relationship, the importance for jobs on both sides of the border, addressing concerns from both sides of the border, but again, having productive conversations at what I think is a very critical time for North America.
Does it worry you at all, though, as a final point, Minister Schulz, that the president-elect seems to view the trade imbalance caused by buying expensive products like oil as a subsidy? Because that's a tough starting point for trade negotiations when there's a factual gap in how things work.
You know, I think the premier did a great job in providing some additional context. I know, like I said, she's been spending a lot of time down there, you know, in terms of reaching out to state legislators and governors and others, especially within a new incoming party. And, you know, she's been doing a great job, not only standing up for Alberta, but standing up for Canada, pointing out areas where we do have aligned interests, again, when it comes to trade, especially when we're talking about energy security, providing safe, affordable, reliable energy to North America. Obviously, other areas include ag and forestry. And so I think it's pretty great to see her having these conversations and providing some context. And I'm glad she's doing that, not only on behalf of Albertans, but Canadians.
Rebecca Schulz is the Alberta Minister of Environment and Protected Areas. Minister, it's good to talk to you. Thanks for being here today.
My pleasure.